Hey there, Joey here for School of Motion, and today we are going to talk about one of the principles of animation, squash and stretch. If you're not sure what animation principles are, they're kind of the secret sauce that makes your work feel good. Squash and stretch is just one of the principles, and there's many more that we can't cover in this lesson. If you really want some in-depth animation training that will give you the foundation you need to create truly outstanding work, you're gonna wanna check out our animation bootcamp course. It's several weeks of intense animation training. You also get access to class-only podcasts, PDFs, and actual critiques on your work from our experienced teaching assistants. Also, don't forget, you can sign up for a free student account so that you can grab the project files from this lesson, as well as assets from any other lesson on the site. So let's go into After Effects and take a look. All right, so here is the animation we built in the previous tutorial. And I'm going to kind of walk through where this started from and how it developed. Now, whenever I do an expression like this, or like this is actually multiple expressions. Whenever I build something like this in After Effects, it's not a process that's linear and goes from A to B, and I know every step along the way. I'm basically experimenting and tweaking and thinking up new things and then having to go back and revise. So I want to try to give you guys a little bit of the sense of that, because if you ever decide to try something like this, it can be very frustrating, but I want you to know that it should be frustrating. That's just how this is. It's programming and it's animation and it's all wrapped into one, and it can be very complicated when you get into stuff like this. But if you just keep bashing your head against the keyboard, eventually you can get something really, really useful. Hopefully that you can share with other people. So let's make a new comp, all right? And let's add a circle. And by the way, just so you guys, if you didn't know this, if you want to add a new shape layer, you can select, one of these options here. I picked the ellipse tool. If you double click it, it creates a shape that fills your comp. All right, so now if I hit UU and you just double tap U, it brings up all of the options for a layer that have been changed or are not the default settings. So it's bringing up the size of this layer. So now I can just set this to, let's say 50 by 50, get a nice little ball here. We're good to go. Okay, so first, why don't we just create a simple motion path just to try this out? All right, so we're gonna start the ball here, position, and then we're gonna go forward 1 second and move it up to the top right corner. We are going to easy ease those, quickly come into the curve editor. And of course, I am going to need to, actually, I'm going to use the shortcut method here, which I normally don't do, but just to save time, I'm going to use the speed graph editor, and I'm just going to pull these handles out, which is basically the same as creating a really strong S-curve in the value graph editor. So if I do a RAM preview, you'll see that I still get that slow acceleration, quick movement in the middle, slow deceleration at the end, okay? So now if we wanted to be able to just simply with one control figure out the squash and stretch of this, how would we do that, okay? So here's the problem I was having. And I'm just gonna make a quick little example here. So here's another circle for us. Now, if I set the anchor point of that right in the middle, and we just adjust the scale, all right? So if this circle was moving side to side like this, it would be easy to stretch it, okay? You could stretch it on X, squash it on Y, okay? If it was moving up and down, same thing. You could stretch it on Y, squash it on X, and get the shape you're looking for. Now, our circle is moving diagonally. It's moving, like a 30-degree angle or something. So how do you stretch something at an angle in After Effects? Well, as I showed you guys in the previous tutorial, you can go to Effect, grab a Transform effect, set the anchor point and position to the center of your layer, and then skew it. Okay, and you can adjust the skew axis. So that's one way to do it. And then you could sort of come up with a way of skewing it and adjusting the skew axis. Now, this is actually what I tried first. And the problem is skewing works great when something is at an angle. But let's say you just want the ball to move left to right. Well, the skew axis, it's hard to tell with a circle. Let me actually use a rectangle here, or a square, so you guys will be able to see this better. All right, so if we do that same trick, transform, put the anchor point right in the middle, put the position right in the middle, and we skew it, you can see that it's actually not skewing it the right way when it's 90 degrees, you know? It's bending it too. So what we would end up having to do is, you know, right now it looks like it's bent, sort of skewed at like a 45-degree angle. Well, what if I just wanted it stretched horizontally? There's not a great way to do that using skew. So it would have to be some combination of skew and then maybe rotation, but even that gets wonky. The skew wasn't the answer, and I knew that. So the way I ended up solving this was I realized that you can stack the transform effect. You can have multiple copies of it on a layer. And that was going to be the solution. And the way I came up with this is actually very interesting. I took a flame class at NAB several years ago, and they showed this trick on a flame. And this is pretty typical in my experience anyway with motion graphics, is you learn something completely unrelated 8-10 years, you know, in the past, and then one day you're on a job or you're trying to figure something out and your brain solves it for you, and you realize this information that was useless 10 years ago has now saved my butt. So the way this works is, what we're going to do is we are going to rotate the layer, scale it, and then rotate it back. So we're actually going to use 3 transform effects. So let's do it on our circle so we can start building this rig. So the first thing we need to do is add a transform effect. And as I showed you guys, the transform effect, right now, if I scale this, for example, you can see that it's doing something weird, right? That's because it's scaling it from the anchor point of the transform effect, not from the anchor point of my layer. The anchor point of transform effect right now is in the middle of my comp, not where I want it. I want the anchor point and the position of this effect to always match where my layer is. So the easy way to do that is hold Option, click on anchor point, which adds an expression. When you Option click one of these stopwatches and the values turn red, it gives you an expression box to enter an expression. And actually, all I need to do is type in position. And actually, I need to type in this layer dot position. All right, so this layer, this is all kind of a shortcut to just get to the position of this layer. The long way of doing it would be to pick whip this layer, and it would say this layer, and I would make a period. And if this isn't ringing a bell, if this stuff isn't making a lot of sense to you, you should definitely go watch my Intro to After Effects Expressions tutorial, because it explains a lot of the basics of how expressions work and some of the syntax. Then I would come over here to this little language menu, and you would go to layer, properties, position, semicolon. There you go. All right, now you can see when I did that on the anchor point, it actually moved my layer to the middle, which isn't what I want. All you have to do is make sure your anchor point and your position are both set to the layer position. So I'm just going to copy this, hold Option and click on position, paste that. There we go. So now as my layer moves, you can see up here, if you watch these numbers up here, those numbers are now moving, and they are matching now the position of this layer. So any transforms I do using this effect will actually work on the same anchor point as the layer itself. So these are now sort of just a separate set of position, scale, rotation keyframes I can add, which is great. Right now, if we want to scale this, by default it's set to uniform scale. So if we uncheck that, we can now, there we go. We can manipulate the height and the width separately, okay? So you can see we still have the same problem. The width only goes left to right. The height only goes up and down. How do we scale it at an angle? All right, well, what we need to do is figure out what angle this is moving at, all right? Now, that was the trickiest part of this whole thing. So it turns out that there is actually a good way to figure out the angle a layer is moving in After Effects, and that is to measure 2 points along that layer's path, and then you can measure the angle between those 2 points. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So what we are going to do is put an expression on the rotation parameter of this transform effect. So I'm going to option click that. So what we need to do is we need to create 2 variables, point 1 and point 2, and get the position of this layer at 2 different points in time. So point 1 is just P1 equals, and I'm going to do this layer dot position. Now, I don't want this layer's position at its current time. What I want to do is measure its position a little bit before and a little bit after the current frame. So that way I'll know what direction it's moving. If I know where it's been and I know where it's going, I know what direction it's going. All right. So this layer, position, and then another period, and there's a cool expression that I could do a whole tutorial on. It's called value at time. So value at time. What value at time does is it measures any property, or almost any property, but at a different time than the current time. And so all you have to do is feed it what time you actually want to look at. So the current time in After Effects is expressed by just typing in time. Okay, so if I ended the expression there, this would actually give me the current position. So value at time is redundant. It's just saying what is the value right now. Okay, well that's not what I want. What I actually want is what is the value 1 frame ago. All right, so the normal way would to say what the time 1 frame ago is time minus, and then I'm going to do another parentheses here, 1/24. Now, why 1/24? Because After Effects expressions work in seconds, not in frames. So if I want 1 frame ago, I actually have to figure out how many seconds that was. And since I'm working at 23,976, or pretty much 24 frames a second, I have to divide 1 frame by 24 frames per second. Now, what happens if you guys want to use this expression and you're not working at 24? What if you're working at 25? You're working in PAL or something. So that occurred to me. So what I did was I created a variable at the top here, FPS. And FPS, I'm going to set it to this comp frame duration. All right, and just to show you guys that I had to look that up, if you go down to comp in your expressions menu, you can actually see that you have frame duration right here. What frame duration tells you is not the frames per second, it's how long 1 frame lasts, okay? So frame duration in a 24 frames a second comp is 1 divided by 24. So now I can just replace this with FPS. Okay? And the great thing about doing it this way is that if I change the frame rate of this comp to 30 or 25 or 60, or if I'm Peter Jackson, 48, then I don't have to update my expression. It will automatically do it. And when you're writing rigs that you're going to share and that you want to be, easily reusable, you want to try to think ahead to things like this. So let's move on to P2. P2 is going to be this layer, position, value at time. Now we're going to do time plus 1 frame. Okay, so now we have the position of this layer. All right, you can see here's the motion path. So I have the position 1 frame ago, which is right about here, and 1 frame from now, right about here. All right, so now using some geometry, which might be a terrifying concept for some of you guys, but you don't really have to know geometry because you have something even better. You have Google. And this is exactly how I found this expression. I suspected I would need geometry for it, but I didn't want to have to open a math book. So I Googled After Effects expressions, find angle of layer, or something like that. I'll link to the actual page I found. so I can give credit. And I found an expression that does exactly this. You take 2 points and it gives you the angle between them, and it's perfect. So what I'm going to do is just come over here and I'm going to copy that right out of this and paste it in there. All right, and there's some extra stuff on the end here I need to get rid of. All right, so let me walk you through the second part of this. So we have point 1 and point 2. What we need to find is the difference in x and y between point 1 and point 2. All right, so what happens next is a variable called delta is created. Delta is the result of subtracting point 1 and point 2, or subtracting point 2's position from point 1's position. Now, point 1 and point 2 both have an x and a y value, so you could separate the x and y out and subtract each one separately. What this expression does, sub, is it just does that all in one go for you. Sub can take variables that have more than one value, like an x and a y, and it can subtract the x's and the y's all in one thing. Then, once you have that, you use, and if you're like me, you didn't even remember that this existed, but you have to use an arctangent, which is a way of figuring out an angle based on the length of two sides of a triangle. You don't really need to know that. All you need to know is that this expression works, and you can copy and paste it in, and you're good to go. So we have the difference between point 1 and point 2. We get the angle of between those 2 points using this math arctangent expression. Then we have to convert the result of that from radians into degrees. And if you're not familiar with radians is another way of expressing an angle. It's based on pi. And when you're doing math, geometry a lot of times works in radians, not in angles. So this converts it into degrees because this rotation property is expecting degrees. And then I can erase this little +0 thing here. And then it's taking the negative of that angle and it's doing something with a percent sign of 360. I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to look that up. But the result of that is now that this rotation property actually matches the angle that this layer is traveling at. And to prove it, if I scale the height, the width, you can see that it's kind of perpendicular to that, right? So it's not lining up exactly just yet, but it's, you can see that it does orient. And if I add a point here on this motion path, you'll see that this does rotate and it kind of sort of follows the motion path, all right? So when I had this, I knew I was kind of close, but not really close. Like, I had figured out something, but I wasn't sure what. And so let's just get rid of this negative sign and see if that fixes it. And oh my goodness, look at that. It fixes it. All right, I'm walking you guys through my thought process and sort of the trials and errors that I went through when I made this, okay? So now we've got something kind of useful here. All right, it's actually orienting along the path all by itself. All right, so let's set this width back to 100. Now, I realized that this ball doesn't have a lot of detail, and it's going to make it kind of hard to tell if this expression is really working. So before I went too far, I decided to add a stripe to it. And so, I could show you how to do that with shape layers. Actually, I'm going to, because this is the bonus tutorial, because you guys were nice enough to sign up for the email list, so I'm going to do that really quickly. So what's great about a shape layer, and why don't I just rename this ball, make it kosher. What's great about shape layers is you can have multiple shapes within the layer. So what I'm going to do is, with this selected, I'm going to add a rectangular shape here. You can see I'm getting some crazy stuff here because this layer is rotated, which is fine with me. So now I have a rectangle and an ellipse. And what I need to do is first make this rectangle a different color so I can see it. So let's take this, let's just make it white, okay? And then I need to crop it so it only shows up within that circle. All right, so shape layers work a lot like Adobe Illustrator. You can actually merge paths the same way and get some cool compound shapes. So what I'm going to do is add an empty group. All right, and I'm going to call this group stripe. Inside of that group, I need my rectangle path. And I also need a copy of my ellipse path. So I'm going to duplicate that ellipse path and bring it up here. Put it inside of that stripe group. And then what I'm going to do is inside of the stripe group, with it selected, I'm going to add a merge paths. All right, and when I do this, you can have different modes. So right now it's set to add. I want intersect. So it's basically giving me a new shape where these two paths intersect. And then that merge paths comes with its own stroke and fill. I don't want the stroke. I do want the fill, and I want that fill to be a different color. And look at that. Now we have a white stripe on the ball. It's all in one layer, and we're good to go. Okay. And what's great about this is that if I had this ball rotating, it will rotate as it goes along the path. But if it's being stretched by the expression, it will stretch sort of as it's being rotated. So you see, this is the power of using this transform effect. You can sort of combine and make these compound transforms that would be really tricky to do any other way. All right, so now we have our ball, and our rotation expression appears to be working. All right, now here's what was throwing me, okay? I don't actually want the layer to auto-orient, okay? And now that the stripe is on there, you can see the problem. Let's say I have a ball and I want it to do just like a bouncing animation, right? Just like this. I don't actually want that ball to rotate along the path, right? That's not what balls do. I want to be able to control that myself. But I do want it to stretch along that, okay? So that left me with a conundrum, all right? So what I realized needed to happen was I need to rotate the layer, then scale it so that it's scaled in the right direction, but then unrotate the layer so that I can actually handle the rotation of the ball or whatever the layer is by myself and not have the expression do that for me, all right? I want this ball to basically stay oriented however I tell it until I change it. So that's when I came up with the idea of separating these transform effects into different parts so I could control each part separately. So the first part is rotating the layer in one direction, okay? Now let's duplicate this. And we'll call this transform effect scale. All right, so what I'm going to do is hit U so I can open up my expressions here. And I'm going to delete this rotation expression. Okay? So what I want this second effect to do is to either scale or squash or stretch this, right? So it has been rotated, right? And I know this isn't going to make sense until the next step too. So let me just go ahead and add my next rotation. So I have O1 rotate, O2 scale, O3 unrotate. All right. And so what's going to happen is the first step rotates it. The second step is going to stretch it. And it's going to stretch it in the wrong direction, but then it will unrotate it, and now it will be stretched back in the right direction. And this goes back to the flame class I took, and I have to tell you, professionally, I have never used a flame, but I learned something useful in that class. You never know what you're going to take away from learning stuff. So on the unrotate, this is going to be a really simple setup. This rotation, this whole rotation expression here, we can just get rid of. All we need to do, all right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the tilde symbol. So if you guys don't know, the tilde key, wherever your mouse is over, when you hit it, it will make that temporarily take up the whole screen. It's a very useful shortcut. So I basically want this unrotate to just negate whatever's going on with this rotate. So if I hit Option, click on Rotation here, and I pick whip to this, but then I come to the beginning and just add a negative sign. There we go. I'm going to hit the tilde again. So now what's happening is the ball is not actually rotating along the path anymore. However, if I go to O2 scale and scale it, all right, and you can see now we're getting some interesting stuff. We're getting this perpendicular bend, which is not right. However, it is orienting to the path, right? Now, why is it rotating backwards? All right. So this was the problem I ran into, and I realized that what's probably happening is it's the order that I'm rotating things in. I'm rotating it one way, then I'm rotating it back the other way, and whatever I'm doing is making it rotate backwards, okay? And you can even see here, as it comes over this hump, it spins completely the opposite way you would expect it to. So what I did was I came into O1 rotate, and I just took a look at this rotation expression and I just out of curiosity, I thought, what if I put a minus symbol in front of this? And whoa, would you look at that? And now we're good to go. All right, and you can see that what's cool is it is orienting along that path. However, this stripe in the middle of the ball is staying flat. It's not actually changing its angle at all. All right. So if I go into scale here, and I turn the width down so it's not so extreme, right? You can see that layer, it retains any transforms I have given it, and all it's doing is stretching along the path. All right. So what I've basically done is built my own skew here that can skew that layer at any angle by rotating it, then scaling it, then unrotating it. And it gets its rotation automatically by choosing a point directly before and directly after the current position of the layer, and using a little geometry. All right, so now we've kind of gotten close. And when I realized this was working was when I said, well, what if this ball is rotating, right? If I give it its own rotation along this motion path and just have it rotate a little bit. You can see that it's rotating, and as it's rotating, it's still stretching, which is just awesome, okay? So now we actually have the rig. This is the basis of this rig. The rest of it was just creating some controls. So what I knew was I wanted a control for the squash and stretch amount. So I added an expression control, slider control. All right, and I just called this SS amount. Move it up to the top. And I set it to 100. And the way I rigged this up was I tied the width, the scale width, to this slider. All right, so that's really easy. All you got to do is option click that and then drag this up to slider. All right, and so now this slider controls the squash and stretch amount. Okay. So stretch, squash, okay? Now, of course, as I showed you in the previous tutorial, when I stretch something out, I want it to squash by an equal amount so that the total volume of that layer doesn't change. So I need to put an expression on the height that looks at the width and adjusts itself accordingly. All right, so what I did was I added an expression to height, and I said W for width equals whatever this width is. All right, so now let's make this an easy example. All right, so if I'm scaling the width to 150, what does the height need to be? Well, the height needs to be 50 because I've added 50 to the width. I need to subtract 50 from the height. So I had to kind of figure out in my head, how do I figure that out? So what I basically want to do is take the difference between the normal width, which is 100%, and the changed width. So whatever that difference is, I need to subtract that from 100, okay? So if the width is 150, then what that means is I have added 50 to the width. I'm going to subtract 50 from the height, okay? So the height starts at 100, the same as the width. All right, and from that, I'm going to subtract, and now I need to find the difference. So the difference is going to be whatever the width is set to minus 100. Okay, So there we go. So now when I set the width to 150, the height goes to 50. Okay, if I go even longer, then the width, if I set the width to 190, the height becomes 10. And an easier way to have done this would just be subtract whatever the width is from 200, but I didn't think of that when I was coming up with this. I came up with this much sillier equation here. So, and then the great thing is if this is less than 100, if it's 50, then it increases the height, okay? So this is now going to totally create this squash and stretch effect for us, all right? So now we have a control, and at that point I said, well, shoot, I'm ready to start animating, and I think that's about it. That's great. So as I started animating the ball bounce, I found some issues, all right? So why don't we just do a quick little, maybe one bounce here. Okay, so the ball's going to start here. I'm going to separate the dimensions. All right, and I'm just going to do the Y position first. All right, we'll go forward 10 frames, and it's going to fall. And then we're going to go forward, say 6 frames, and it's going to come up about halfway. Okay, so let's just quickly do the curves for this. And try and fly through this. All right, so it's going to accelerate till it hits the ground. It's going to pop back up, ease into that position. All right, so just like that. Now, at the same time, I'm going to animate the X position so that we actually get a little bit of a bounce. All right, there you go. Perfect. Now, if we put squash and stretch on, it's going to orient itself along the drop now. Now, the problem is when it hits the ground, it's going to squash, and you can see that because of the way it's measuring the angle, it's looking 1 frame backwards and 1 frame forwards. It's not going to get the exact angle right all the time. It's going to be really close, and for most cases, it's fine. But for extreme cases, like a ball hitting a floor or something changing direction drastically really quickly, it's not going to be the right angle. So I needed a way to adjust that. All right, so that's when I decided to add another expression slider. So what I did was I duplicated SS amount, and actually I'm going to do this a different way now. I'm going to use an angle control here. All right, so this angle control we're going to call SS angle offset. Okay. Now, what is this going to drive? It is going to drive the initial rotation. All right, so let's hit U on this ball, go into the rotation expression. And basically, all we need to do is leave this part the same, but then add whatever the value of this offset is. All right, so if the offset's 0, it's not going to affect it at all. If it's not 0, it is going to affect it, and it'll be something we can control. So all I'm going to do is say plus, click and pick whip to this, add a semicolon, and we're good. So now this angle offset is going to allow me to keyframe and sort of, create some nice flat shapes, all right, for the ball. All right, so it's going to be 0 here, and let me just go ahead and start keyframing this. So at the beginning of this animation, the ball is not moving. All right, as it approaches the fastest point of its animation, which is this frame, it's going to stretch out to its maximum stretch, whatever that's going to be, 130, let's say. All right, when it hits the ground, it will immediately compress. So it will now go less than 100. So let's say it goes to 80, or it could compress a lot, let's say 60. All right, so now the angle's wrong. So what I'm going to do is go back 1 frame, put a keyframe there, go forward 1 frame, and adjust this until it's right. Okay? And then on the next frame, I'm going to reset this. And then it's going to stretch out a little bit as it reaches the fastest point. It's going to stretch out the most. And then as it reaches the top, it's going to go back to 100. Okay? So if we ram preview this, there we go. You see we've got our nice little squash and stretch bounce animation going. Okay? Now, when I started actually animating this on my background, which had a floor, that's when I noticed that when you squash the ball, it's squashing from the center point of the ball. When in reality, the ball is going to squash from the bottom of the ball. Wherever it makes contact with the floor, that's the anchor point of the squashing. So I needed to be able to adjust that as well. So then I duplicated SS amount and I called it SSY offset. Let's turn off the keyframes, set this to 0. All right, so now I need a way. You can see the rabbit hole that you go down when you start building rigs like this. I needed a way to actually shift the position of this layer down by a little bit or up, depending on what it's doing. So I decided the easiest way would just be add another transform effect. So I just duplicated this one here, and let's name this O4Y offset. I'm going to hit U on this. I'm going to hit my tilde key. You can see we've got a lot of expressions going on now. So on the Y offset transform effect, I'm going to delete this rotation expression. We don't need that. What we're actually going to change is the position. So what we're going to do is start with whatever the position is and then add whatever the Y offset is to this Y value. All right, so the way to do that is we're going to adjust the position expression here. All right, and I'm going to create a variable. So I'm going to say original equals this layer position. So now what we want to do is get this Y offset. So then we'll say Y off. I'm just making these variable names up. Y off is now whatever this slider is set to. All right, so now the value of this position is going to be, we're going to open it with brackets because it's expecting an X and a Y. And whenever a property expects two values, you have to bracket them. So we're going to open the brackets, and first it wants the X value. So the X value is going to be the original position, but the first value of the original position, which will be the X value. In After Effects, when you have two values, the first one is numbered 0, and the second one is numbered 1. So it's kind of confusing, but you just need to know that when you're counting in After Effects, you start from 0. So that first value, original bracket 0, that's actually saying the original layer position, X value, then comma, original 1. So now the Y value plus Y offset. So we're basically taking the original position, feeding it back, but adding a Y offset to the Y value. Okay? So now if I adjust this layer, it will still move if I zoom out so you can see this whole thing. The layer still moves exactly as it did before, and it still stretches and scales and follows its motion path, but it is now offset on Y. And this is keyframeable. So normally it's going to be at 0. So one frame, on this frame, the Y offset is 0. Go forward one frame, and we're just going to tweak it. So now it's touching the ground. Go forward one frame, and it's 0. So there you go. That's how it works. All right? It's that simple. All right, and the last thing I added for this rig was the ability to have a global sort of multiplier, so that if you wanted more or less squash and stretch, you could easily globally apply that. So let's duplicate this, call it SS multiplier. Turn off keyframes, and we'll set this to 1. All right, so if you multiply something by 1, it doesn't change. So that's where we're going to start it. So what is this going to affect? This is going to affect the scale transform, okay? And really all we need to worry about is the width, because the height has an expression on it that reacts to the width. All right, so let's go down here. Let's find that expression. So here's scale, and here's width. Okay, so here is my width expression. And this is when I wish I had my height expression. This is when I wish I had a bigger monitor, or maybe, maybe 2 monitors or something like that. Okay, so the width here, the width is looking at the SS amount slider, okay? So really, all we need to do is multiply that by the multiplier. All right, so if the width is set to, 100, and you multiply it by 1, nothing's going to change. If you multiply it by 2, what's it going to be? It's going to be 200. As I'm saying this to you, I'm having the same revelation I had the other night when I made this expression, that actually isn't going to work either, because what I actually want is I want that multiplier to affect just the change in squash or stretch. So when this SS amount is set to 100, this multiplier shouldn't have any effect on it, because when there's no squash or stretch going on, it should be unaffected. But as soon as you get some squash or stretch, then it will start to be affected. So how are we going to do that? All right, so again, what we really need to affect is the difference between the default value of 100 and whatever the new value is, okay? So what we're going to do is we need to measure what is the amount of squash and stretch. So let's make a variable. Amount equals this, the value of the SS amount slider, okay? So then what we can say is now we need to measure the change in the squash and stretch, as opposed to no squash and stretch. So because we're starting at 100, if we're going to stretch, we're going to go up to, say, 150. The change is 50. That's what we need to measure. So what we need to do is say the change. So I'm going to use D for delta. So D equals the amount minus 100. All right, so if we have stretched to 150, this will give us a D of 50. Now I'm going to multiply D times this multiplier, okay? So now the multiplied amount, I'm just going to put mult. Mult equals D times the multiplier. So what we've done is we figured out the change in squash and stretch, and now we've multiplied that by default by 1. Doesn't change anything. But if I change that to 2, now it's going to change twice as much. But if it's not changing at all, if it's still set to 100, nothing will happen, okay? And then what we want to return here is 100 plus that result of mult, okay? So now, when this is set to 100, nothing happens, okay? And let's just play this bounce animation so you can see what's going on. All right, now in the middle of this bounce animation, if I change this to 2, it's going to stretch twice as much. But if we go back to the beginning, it's still completely untouched, okay? That's because this multiplier is now only affecting the change in squash and stretch, okay? So now you can see it's a lot more exaggerated. And you can crank this up, all right? If I set to 3, you're seeing I'm getting a really thin, kind of goofy, and then when it hits the ground, it really splats. It becomes like a pancake. So it's too much. And then this also works if you go less than 1, if you want to decrease the squash and stretch. All right, and I guess if you wanted to, you could even keyframe this. All right, so by default, that's at 1, but that is kind of a global effector for your squash and stretch. All right, so I think this rig is done. I think it seemed a lot simpler this time around because I knew how to do it. So there you go. That is how I built this rig. And if I wanted to apply this to anything, all I have to do is copy all of these effects onto a different layer. All right, so let's just do a quick test just to make sure that this works the way I think it does. So let's hide the ball and let's make something that's not as obvious. Let's make a star, something like that, okay? And I'm going to move the anchor point of that star into the middle, okay? And I'm just going to do a quick little animations here. So it's going to start here. Going to go forward. Let's go 20 frames. It's going to come over here. You can see the anchor point's all messed up. So why don't we fix that? There we go. All right, so position, go forward 20 frames, move it. Then we'll go another 20 frames, come back the other way. I'm having all kinds of trouble here, people. Here we go. All right. And then we'll just use the default easy ease on those. Save ourselves some time. All right, so here's what our star's doing. Okay. And now I'm going to come here. I'm going to disable all of these stopwatches. So we're kind of at the default values here. I'm just going to select all of these and copy them onto the star. Okay. So we come here, put a keyframe on squash and stretch amount. As it gets to the middle, it's going to stretch out. And you can see it is stretching out in the right direction. And then as it comes here, I'm going to have it, I'm actually going to have it squash a little bit. Just a little. Because it's kind of decelerating. And then it's going to come back, stretch out again. And as it gets to the end, it's going to squash just a little, and then it's going to reset back to 100. All right, so just that quick, you've got this thing squashing and stretching and reacting in the direction it's moving. And especially with something, with like a complex contour like a star, this would be very hard to do without a rig like this. You'd have to either animate masks, or you'd have to try and get it to work with the skew, but then let's say you had the star move straight up and down or left and right, it wouldn't work. So with this rig, this makes it very, very simple. So there you go. Thank you guys so much, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this lesson gave you a good understanding of the animation principle of squash and stretch. If you want to know more about how to use the principles of animation to really take your work to the next level, make sure you check out our Animation Bootcamp course for an in-depth learning experience focused on teaching you the craft of animation. If you have any questions or thoughts about this lesson, let us know. And we'd love to hear from you if you use this technique on a project. So give us a shout on Twitter @SchoolofMotion and show us your work. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.